Going live. And we're live. Aha. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Pardon me, folks. Hello, anybody out there in YouTube land. If you're just there, we're just on a wee bit early just to make sure everything's working okay, as usual. So it looks like we've got green for the sound machine and picture seems to be okay. So we'll just wait till 10 o'clock to say hello to everybody. Let me just turn that there a wee bit. There we go. And there's Sean Wild saying, good evening, Doc. How you doing, Sean? Good to see you. Thank you very much for joining us, as always. There's 10 o'clock, Sean. And there's Babs saying, evening, Doc. How you doing, Babs? So I'll just say hello to everybody, actually. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Doc Sloan. Welcome to my science fiction station tonight. We're getting on with Chapter 14 of our God Emperor of Dune book club. It promises to be an interesting chapter, to say the least. And a good follow-on from the previous chapter. And we have plenty in it to have a sort of natter about, actually. So looking forward to it. Babs is saying, howdy, Sean. Sootpot saying, hi, guys, I'll be lurking tonight. How you doing, Sootpot? Good to see you all. Thank you very much for joining us. As I was totally dosed last week. I do apologize. I just got one of those, what do you call them, 24-hour sort of colds or something like that. But was absolutely bleh. Couldn't hear myself properly at all. So much better tonight. And we can cut down on the sort of nervous laughter and so on. It had really thrown me last week because I couldn't hear myself properly at all. But there we go. But yes, sorry we didn't get on last night, folks. As usual, if we can't get on the Thursday, we will do our best to go with the Friday. And simply life got a wee bit busy for me this week, and I didn't have the work done last night, so I was still about 2 or 3 pages to go. So that's pretty much why we didn't get going. I was hoping to have it done in time, but it didn't happen, hence the late notice, you know. But usually with me, that's the way I'll go, is I'll try and work up to the last minute and see if I can make it, you know. But if not, we'll run with the next day, which is what we're doing here. So hopefully next week we'll be back to normal. Our preference is to go every Thursday if we can. But it's not too often that the work gets on top of us, actually, these days. But it's basically it's because we're selling our house, so we're showing people around, and we're kind of getting interruptions into the daily life, if you like, you know. So it's a bit awkward sometimes. But we're getting there, hopefully, sooner or later. Yeah, so I hope you're all keeping well. And apologies to anybody who's missed out our normal time and catching up. You know, sorry about that. As I said, we'll hopefully be back to Thursday next week. Where we don't have a particularly immense chapter. This chapter is only about 8 pages, by the way, folks, but there's an awful lot in it. And I've ended up sort of making lots of little notes and questions about some things. And again, it's quite an interesting one to follow on from the previous chapter, which was a great chapter, by the way, where we get this back and forth between Leto and his new Duncan, and an awful lot of evasion, sort of, you'll get your answers from Moneo, the fish speakers, this kind of thing. But it's an interesting sort of little exploration. And of course we get this chapter, I suppose, answers the questions that Duncan Idaho has about why the God Emperor has a female-only army. And we're going to get, how is it put? How is it put? Is it Leto's Leto's theory on it? Basically, I think. Yeah, and it's a strange little chapter. I suppose it ties into some other things that we can have a wee natter about. In particular, I suppose we have that kind of questioning about Frank's attitudes to homosexuality within one of the kind of talks he was doing at a university there. I've got that on a document here, so we can bring that up and have a wee chat about it in a minute or two, or whenever we can fit it in, I suppose, at the right place within the chapter. Pardon me. So here's our epigraph, just to get us going. I know, again, this is from the Stolen Journal, so this is kind of in the persona of Leto, isn't it? I know the evil of my ancestors because I am those people. The balance is delicate in the extreme. I know that few of you who read my words have ever thought about your ancestors this way. It has not occurred to you that your ancestors were survivors and that the survival itself sometimes involved savage decisions, a kind of wanton brutality, which civilized humankind works very hard to suppress. What price will you pay for that suppression? Will you accept your own extinction? And this is from the Stolen Journals. Yeah, sorry, I was just scanning that for for commas again. I think it could have done with an extra one. But there we go. I know the evil of my ancestors because I am those people. The balance is delicate and extreme. I'm assuming that that's the God Emperor talking about the balance between good and evil people within his other memory. Few of you don't think about your ancestors this way. It's not occurred your ancestors were survivors, and that the survival itself sometimes involves savage decisions, a kind of wanton brutality which civilized humankind works very hard to suppress. What price will you pay for that suppression? Will you accept your own extinction? I've written down here just quite possibly CAI. Your ancestors were survivors. I suppose I've kind of written down not necessarily. They survived long enough to have sex and pass on their DNA, basically. It depends on how you look at it. So this suppression that we're talking about is going to be to do with the God Emperor's theories on the all-male army. And an idea that I suppose we get from psychology called sublimation. We'll have a wee natter about it whenever we get to it. So that particularly this epigraph is relevant to the chapter ahead. So it's an interesting concept, I suppose. What price for the appearance of civilization? Hang on, is this something I've written here? Bear with me a wee second. What price for the suppression of savage decisions and wanton brutality? What price for the appearance of civilization? Suppression of evil. Will you pay without extinction with your own species? Is basically what he's asking here. So there we go. Just catch up with your comments and arrivals there, folks. There's Carlos Crisella saying, "What's up, Doc? Hello, everyone. How you doing, Carlos? Thanks very much for joining us. Good to see you there." And hi, Babs. It's saying. Cynthia's saying, "Hi, Doc. Hi, all. Hi, Cynthia. How are you?" And Flaccid House saying, "Hi, Doc. Evening, all." Yeah, thanks very much for joining us, folks. Those who can make it tonight. I know it's not our normal night, but as I said, we kind of go with the Friday if we can't get the Thursday. But it's good to see so many of you here. Here, I think I'm going to get a little bit better. Just bear with me a wee second. A little bit better light over here. There we go. That's a bit better. Much better. Yes, there we go. Thank you. So good to see you here, folks. Yeah, we're going to get some interesting ideas, I suppose, tonight. Oh, here, I know a couple of you sent me wee comments there just before the show. Sorry I didn't get a chance to answer them in time. And if Julian's out there, or whenever you say hello, hi, Julian, I'll fire you an email back at the end of the show just to let you know that's fine. And try and arrange something for this weekend if you're about, And there's the Baked Alaska Joe saying, "Howdy all, don't forget the like button. Cheers, Baked Alaska Joe. Thank you very much." So there we go. So this is an interesting chapter, to say the least. This is, I suppose, following on from Duncan meeting Leto. This will be his first morning, as we're told, of Fish Speaker Command. So I'll just get some fluids and we'll get cracking, folks. And if anybody's got any questions or comments, let me know. Right, here we go. As he dressed for his first morning of Fish Speaker Command, Idaho tried to shake off a nightmare. It had awakened him twice, and both times he had gone out to the balcony to stare up at the stars, the dream still roaring in his head. Duncan's nightmare. Oh, sorry, that's me, right? I've written that there. Sorry, apologies. This is Duncan's nightmare. So women, weaponless women in black armor, rushing at him with the hoarse, mindless shouting of a mob, waving hands moist with red blood. And as they swarmed over him, their mouths opened to display terrible fangs. In that moment, he awoke. Morning light did little to dispel the effects of the nightmare. So yeah, straight off that we get with I suppose this nightmare. We're going to see that Duncan's probably got a bit of a fixation with what's going on with this all-female army. What's the deal? As we go through this chapter, but very interestingly, we sort of start off with this kind of nightmare that he's having. That he's having more than once. Weaponless women in black armor. Pardon me. Rushing at him with the hoarse, mindless shouting of a mob, waving hands moist with red blood, and as they swarmed over him, their mouths opened to display terrible fangs. That reminded me very much on the Maenids, or the Bacchae, as they're also known. Pardon me. The Bassarids as well, which are the troop of women. I suppose followers, if you like, of Dionysus. Well, it's reminded me on a bunch of things. I've got vampires, kind of, that kind of thing. Even to a degree, the Sphinx, that kind of, Lamias, female monsters, Gorgons as well. Let me just see. Bear with me, man. There we go. So just quickly, for anybody who's not familiar with them, in Greek mythology, the Maenids were the female followers of Dionysus and the most significant members of his retinue, the Thyasus. Their name, which comes from Mainumai, means to rave, to be mad, to rage, to be angry, and literally translates as the raving ones. Maenids were also known as Bassarids, Bacchae, or Bacchantes. In Roman mythology, after the penchant of the equivalent Roman god Bacchus to wear a bassaris or fox skin. Often the Maenids are portrayed as inspired by Dionysus into a state of ecstatic frenzy through a combination of dancing and intoxication. During these rites, the Maenids would dress in fawn skins and carry a thrysus, which is a long stick wrapped in ivy or vine leaves and tipped with a pine cone. They would weave ivy wreaths around their heads and often handle or wear snakes. So yes, indeed, probably the most famous story involving them would be with Orpheus, I think. Let me see, will it be down here? A group of men is also kill Orpheus when he refuses to entertain them while mourning his dead wife. Yeah, that's quite a quite a famous scene, I think. So yeah, this nightmare. I suppose the Gorgons as well. Medusa, Stethano, and Euryale. The three Gorgons, these kind of representations of, how would you put it? Well, I've always looked at Medusa as, I suppose, she represents fundamentally man's fear of woman, I think. Those kind of, hence the apotropaic symbols and so on. But we've got something like that here with Duncan's nightmare. Possibly, and most likely being caused by the fact that there's this all-female army that he's going to be in charge of. So it's causing him nightmares, Big Alaska Joe is saying, is there an uninteresting chapter in all of Herbert's works? I think not. Well, we're hitting some really good ones at the minute, aren't we? But I don't think so. It's a good point to make. Carlos said, given the lack of natural predators humans have to deal with, could war be a subconscious way of culling the species? It could well be. I suppose we have all sorts of theories like that, don't we? That war is kind of some cyclical thing. We'll have a wee chat about. Oh, bear with me a wee second. today. Have I got it down here? There it is. The book to kind of look at in terms of where I think Frank picks up a bunch of his ideas from is The Sexual Cycle of Human Warfare by Norman Walter. That's published by Mitre Press, I think. Let me see, 1950 probably. It's full, yeah, there we go. Mitre Press, Mitre Street, EC3, London, 1950. That's its publishing details. It's available online if you go hunting for it. The Sexual Cycle of Human Warfare, being a new theory of the cause of war and an inquiry into the possibility of war prediction by, there we are. Sexuality starts inside the cell. Just the chapter contents here: the aggregation of living matter, sexual disruption of multicellular bodies, sexual disruption of communities, the genetic significance of the Oedipal situation, war is collective sexual combat, and then, as I suppose, within that next following chapters, general deductions, political deductions, ideological deductions. That's the structure of the book. Pardon me. In fact, I just wanted to have a wee quick. Let's see. No results found. No. Just in relation to a particular term, I was kind of curious there about whether something appeared within that book. It doesn't. But subconscious way of culling the species, I suppose. Again, well, it doesn't seem to have worked very well. Then, if that's the case, I know we get some of these ideas, but as much as populations go up and down, I suppose, but ultimately, if we've had plenty of wars, within the 20th century and already in the 21st century, and our population's at an all-time high, isn't it? Yeah, it's almost kind of one of those kind of old first series, or what do you call it, original Star Trek ideas, that we shall use war to cull the species, maintain our numbers. I don't know. The whole thing is, regardless of who you are getting involved in a war, it's completely random. And I think if you're involved in it, you're a target in it as well. No matter how far back you think you can hide, But yeah, what's the point of? Yeah, well, the point of war, I suppose, to me, this day and age, it's very much if we say, was it war as an extension of politics by any or all means? But it's politics' main concern seems to be business and the making of moolah, and I think very much a lot of wars today are, there's good business to be had at the end of it, during it as well. Good business to be had before, during, and after. But I suppose we're going to get some ideas about this kind of thing within this chapter, aren't we? So that's Duncan's nightmare. Just a bit, very much reminded me of kind of a Bacchiantic scene of the Maenads, if you know. And if anybody's not too sure, if you check out the story of Orpheus, I think how he meets his end is with these group of ladies, In that moment he awoke. Morning light did little to dispel the effects of the nightmare. They had provided him with a room in the North Tower. The balcony looked out over a vista of dunes to a distant cliff with what appeared to be a mud hut village at its base. Idaho buttoned his tunic as he stared at the scene. And we get his thoughts here. Why does Leto choose only women for his army? So this is the the dominating thought here as we go into this chapter. Several comely fish speakers had offered to spend the night with their new commander, but Idaho had rejected them. So no to intercourse here. And if we remember this in a bit, I suppose we'll find out that he has had the offer of sexual experiences with the fish speakers since he's been here, and he has accepted them, I think, prior to this. We'll find that out as we go. So it was not, we get this comment here, and I've just written who's the narrator here. It was not like the Atreides to use sex as a persuader. It's got an exclamation mark there. And I kind of thought that really should be his thoughts there. He looked down at his clothing, a black uniform with golden piping, a red hawk at the left breast, That at least was familiar. No insignia of rank. And we're going to get Moneo said, they know your face, Moneo said. So the commander doesn't really need this symbol of rank if his face has been known to the garrison for, like, we're assuming about 3,500 years. I was actually thinking it might be funny, wouldn't there be if there was a series of portraits of all the Duncans that had served Leto over the years, and how they might be subtly different, but yet not at all. So the red hawk, I suppose we've got that color of blood, the bird of prey, over the heart, if you like, over the left breast. And I suppose just in terms of sartorially looking at these characters, we're going to have Duncan meeting with Moneo, and they make a bit of a contrast. We'll have Duncan all dressed in black. Moneo's going to be all dressed in white. So they know your face, Moneo said. I'm going to get Duncan's thoughts here again. Strange little man, Moneo. This thought brought Idaho up short. Reflection told him that Moneo was not little. Very controlled, yes, but no shorter than I am. Moneo appeared drawn into himself, but collected. Idaho glanced around his room, sybaritic in its attention to comfort, soft cushions, appliances concealed behind panels of brown polished wood. The bath was an ornate display of pastel blue tiles with a combination bath and shower in which at least 6 people could bathe at the same time. The whole place invited self-indulgence. These were quarters where you could let your senses indulge in remembered pleasures. So a bath where you can have up to 6 people in it, etc., etc. I suppose it's a nice apartment, but it's been sort of dressed for super comfort. Lots of cushions, soft furnishings, big bath for your for your orgy of fish speakers, if you like. Clever, Idaho whispered. Dear, oh dear. A gentle tapping on his door was followed by a female voice saying, "Commander, Moneo is here." Idaho glanced out at the sunburnt colors on the distant cliff. "Commander," the voice was a bit louder. "Come in," Idaho called. Moneo entered, closing the door behind him. He wore tunic and trousers of chalk white, which forced the eyes to concentrate on his face. Moneo glanced once around the room. "So this is where they put you? Those damned women. I suppose they thought they were being kind, but they ought to know better." Pardon me. So oddly enough, I've just made a wee scribble at the bottom there with our Duncan in black and our Moneo in white. Is the Moapo, if you like, of Duncan and Moneo. And just with the repetition of certain ideas. Oops, excuse me, I hit something there with my book on my mouse. It also, particularly with something that happens later on, if you like, these are the second skins, if we follow that idea of DDA Anzu's Moapo, that both Duncan and Moneo wear. And I just thought interesting that, the way that Frank has described his writing styles as kind of making opposites and pairings, etc. Within Jungian mandalas. So here we very much have these two men, black and white, I suppose, opposed and working together. So I just thought that was interesting, just worth pointing out. Let me just catch up with your comments there, folks. Julian saying, "What's going on, y'all? Howdy, Doc." I was chatting there to Julian earlier, but you weren't there. Good to see you. How you doing? I was just saying, I'll fire you an email back in response to yours after I've finished the program. But shouldn't be a bother, and let me know a time. But I'll wing that to you as soon as we're done. Look forward to it. Baked Alaska Joe saying, "I got DoorDash on the dock. Let's do this." Idaho fears death by snoo snoo. By snoo snoo. Oh, pardon me. Where do we get to? So this is where they put you, those damn women. I suppose they thought they were being kind, but they ought to know better. How do you know what I like? Idaho demanded. Even as he asked it, he realized it was a foolish question. We get his thoughts here. I'm not the first Duncan Idaho that Moneo has seen. Moneo merely smiled and shrugged. I did not mean to offend you, Commander. Will you keep these quarters then? I like the view, but not the furnishings. It was a statement. These can be changed, Idaho said. Sorry, those can be changed, Idaho said. I will see to it. I suppose you're here to, sorry, I'll say that again. I suppose you're here to explain my duties. As much as I can, I know how strange everything must appear to you at first. This civilization is profoundly different from the one you knew. I can see that. How did my predecessor die? Moneo shrugged. It appeared to be his standard gesture, but there was nothing self-effacing about it. He was fast enough to, oh, sorry, wee mistake there in my notes. There we go. Apologies. This is Moneo. He was not fast enough to escape the consequences of a decision he had made, Moneo said. I've written next to that. That's vague. Be specific, Moneo sighed. The Duncans were always like this, so demanding. The rebellion killed him. Do you wish the details? And again, that's not specific, is it? Would they be useful to me? No. So I've written next to that, well, after all that, Duncan has no answer. And it's almost like on the cusp of getting an answer to his questions that he decides it's not worth it. That he can't be bothered almost. Would it be useful to me? No. Okay, and on we go. So the euphemisms, I suppose, that he was not fast enough to escape the consequences of a decision he had made. That is true, though a bit vague. He wasn't quick enough to get out of the way of the God Emperor just before he got flattened by him. And the rebellion killed him. That it got into his head and made him behave the way he did, I suppose. Also true, though not literally, I suppose. We have it's the God Emperor killed him. Do you wish the details? Would they be useful to me? No. So after all of that in the previous chapter, Duncan doesn't have an answer. And we can't be sure that any answer that he actually gets would be truthful, can we? Oh, good. Yeah, that was something I meant to write down actually just prior to this chapter. I had a bit of space, but I'm going to do it here now quickly. But I'm at the stage, folks. Let me see, where I'm just going to say it out loud. But the God Emperor, as far as I am concerned, is an unreliable narrator. It's as simple as that. I think he cannot, as a reader at this point, and I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, etc. It's in different aspects of to what's going on within this world, whether it be official reports, official recorded histories, his own personal journals, etc. What else have we got? The oral history. His hand is in all of them. By the looks of it, and there's things that he's been saying that are definitely, I think, not true. And it's something that we must, I think, well, at this point, no matter, I'm at the point where it doesn't matter what comes out of the God Emperor's mouth, if it's on a document by him or associated with him, I'm treating it with care. I'm not believing it necessarily. And I suppose we've got something within this chapter that we can have a wee look at about just in terms of how Moneo thinks, and how his thinking is flawed, I suppose, or a result of the God Emperor's propaganda. Let's see. So the civilization, by the way, this civilization is profoundly different from the one you knew. And I suppose even though he's only had a very small glimpse of it, Duncan's response here is, I can see that. So The details to how his predecessor got killed, would they be useful to me? No. Fair enough. I'll want a complete briefing on this rebellion today, but first, why are there no men in Leto's army? He has you. You know what I mean. He has a curious theory about armies. I have discussed it with him on many occasions. But do you not do you not want a breakfast before I explain? Let me just fix that. There's a problem with what I've written there. Bear with me a second, folks. There we go. Can't we have both at the same time? Moneo turned toward the door and called a single word, now. The effect was immediate and fascinating to Idaho. A troop of young fish speakers swarmed into the room. Two of them took a folding table and chairs from behind a panel and placed them on the balcony. Others set the table for two people. More brought food, fresh fruit, hot rolls, and a steaming drink which smelled faintly of spice and caffeine. It was all done with a swift and silent efficiency which spoke of long practice. They left as they had come, without a word. Idaho found himself seated across from Moneo at the table within a minute after the start of this curious performance. Every morning like that? Only if you wish it. Idaho sampled the drink, melange coffee. He recognized the fruit, the soft Caladan melon called Paradan. You get Duncan's thoughts here. My favorite. My favorite. You know me pretty well, Idaho said. We've had some practice. Now about your question and Leto's curious theory. Okay, so before we get into it, I suppose we're getting an author dumping a set of ideas on us here. How they're doing it, they're going to do it over breakfast. We'll run with it, get little interruptions, and I suppose that it's an attempt to kind of make it seem like a natural conversation in a funny way, if you like, to present these ideas with these two characters. And I suppose it can be a tricky thing to do. The word Paradan, by the way, the name of our melon, Paradan or Paraton is a province of the Paratarajas and the Sasanian Empire. The Paratarajas were from 125 to 300 CE. The Sasanian Empire was from 224 to 651 AD. But if you have a wee look at it, it's part of province of those empires, if you like, during that time. Where is it? It's up where kind of, where is it? I suppose the northwest corner of India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and around there. So that's where Paradan is, and the same spelling if you want to have a look it up on Wikipedia. So we get this, I suppose, this diversion of soft furnishings and now breakfast. But here we are at Leto's curious theory. So here we go. Yeah, this is Moneo. Yes, he says that the all-male army was too dangerous to its civilian support base. That's crazy. Without the army, there would have been no... I know the argument. I know the argument, but he says that the male army was a survival of the screening function delegated to the non-breeding males in the prehistoric pack. He says it was a curiously consistent fact that it was always the older males who sent the younger males into battle. What does that mean? Screening function. Oh, bear with me, folks. The ones who were always out on the dangerous perimeter, protecting the core of breeding males, females, and the young. The ones who first encountered the predator. How is that dangerous to the civilians? Idaho took a bite of the melon, found it ripened perfectly. The Lord Leto says that when it was denied an external enemy, the all-male army always turned against its own population. Always. Contending for the females. Perhaps. He obviously does not believe, however, that it was that simple. I don't find this a curious theory. You've not heard all of it. There's more. Oh yes. And we'll just stop there a quick second with our oh yes, just to run into it. So just to recap, the all-male army is too dangerous because it turns on its civilian support base when it doesn't have an enemy. Basically, that's the gist of it. The other part of that is that the male army is part of a survival of the screening function delegated to the non-breeding males in the prehistoric pack. He says it was a curiously consistent fact that it was always the older males who sent the younger males into battle. I've written next to that no. As an absolute, that's not true. Though it's generally as can be seen as a perceived truth, if you like, but it's not an absolute. The survival of the screening function. So basically, in other words, it's some kind of evolutionary screen, if you like, a system, for want of a better term, created by older males in order to get rid of the younger males by sending them into battle, thus leaving them with the breeding females, if you like, to look after the young. And there are plenty of examples of this, I suppose, within history. The Crusades kind of look as a bit like that in some ways. The first Crusades. So that's the first little bit there that we get fed to us. Leto's curious theory. So an all-male army is too dangerous to its civilian support base. Duncan thinks that's crazy. I know the argument, says Moneo. Now we don't know what the argument is, by the way. With the army, there would be no civilian support base. That's the cyclical argument of that. If you like, without the army, we don't blah blah blah. You wouldn't be safe. This kind of thing doesn't really make sense. But I know the argument, so we're left out a wee bit here. The male army is a survival, so it's a hangover, if you like, in that sense of the screening function delegated to non-breeding males in the prehistoric pack. It was, he says, it was a curiously consistent fact that it was always the older males who sent the younger males into battle. I went no. I mean, certainly it does happen, but you can see. Oddly enough, I think it was Julian talking about the Iliad the other week. I think actually referencing the stuff that we're encountering tonight, talking about Achilles and all the people who are involved there with Agamemnon. I'm genuinely thinking that Agamemnon is probably not that much older, possibly than Achilles. But we have a range of ages, if you like, of men there. And I suppose with you got the young Greek soldiers, then you have the kind of kings, etc. But we have people like Nestor, this old wise, Greek who's there to fight. So I can think of examples, and it's not always the case, I suppose. So it's we've got with an absolute here. Let me just catch up with your comments. Goodness, they've got wind on down before I jump any further. Let's see. Johnson, hey Doc, have we a track record of the Gnostic, Hermetic, and Esoteric in your notes? We do. Goodness. Oh, we had. We're going to have a natter a wee bit about some of that stuff as well, aren't we, Julian? We've encountered some of that stuff before with character names in, I'm pretty sure, in Children of Dune, where we had some names. I think we ended up drawing the sigils and stuff from demonology and so on, and a number of texts that were also referenced there. Different, as you say, books referring to Hermetic, Gnostic, esoteric stuff, that kind of thing. Books on demonology. So they're in the notes from when they happened, I suppose. But there was definitely a part of that book, I think, during where we encountered a whole bunch of characters with those names, and I think it was the Fremen that had betrayed the Atreides, if you see what I mean. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, that shouldn't be too hard to find actually. But yeah, I remember looking up. I remember drawing these sigils, but I would have to figure out what chapter they're in. But yes, we've got to. Yeah, there's places we have to head within this, I suppose. But that's one of them. We're going to have a wee look at the God Emperor properly, just sort of as a mythological being. One of the ways we're going to look at him, Julian, is as an old-faced. If you like, one of this, there's a story about an Irish worm, and it's to do with the river goddess Shannon. Shanna within this, and their fate is very similar to what happens. It's an inversion of what happens actually in this book. But we're going to keep that one for when that happens in the book. If you see what I mean, it's about dropping things at the right time. Carlos was saying Moneo was careful not to lie directly to Duncan. And he's giving him truths, as you say. Careful not to lie to him, but still, I still find it funny. I thought it was an interesting couple of chapters of Idaho trying to figure out what's happened to his previous self and just kind of letting it go at the last minute when he's almost 2/3 of the way to the truth, isn't he? So it's the older males sending the younger males to their death as part of a screen, if you like, to improve their odds, if you like, get rid of the competition. This kind of thing. Now, so this is the ones who are always out in the dangerous perimeter, protecting the core of breeding males, females, and the young, the ones who first encountered the predator. How is this dangerous to civilians? Lord Leto says when it was denied an external enemy, the all-male army always turned against its own population, always contending for females. Perhaps he obviously does not believe, however, that it was that simple. Now, I've written next that, so the contention for the females is sex reproduction. And perhaps Moneo was saying here, he obviously does not believe, however, that it was that simple. Now, I've seen this kind of thing done before, and it's like, that's a get out, isn't it? I'm not going to explain it fully. And in a sense, what I'm presenting, it's not going to be that simple. So Duncan says, I don't find this a curious theory. You've not heard all of it. There's more. Oh, yes. He says that the all-male army has a strong tendency towards homosexual activities. Idaho glared across the table at Moneo. I've never... Of course not. He is speaking about sublimation, about deflected energies, and all the rest of it. So I think it's quite funny, Idaho's reaction there. So the all-male army, this will be, I suppose, I don't know if any of you out there are soldiers, or gay for that matter either. So we'll be seeing where Frank goes with this, but it's an interesting one, and I think there's been a bit of a response to this as well. So first of all, what are we talking about here? First of all, the older men tend to send younger men out to do battle, get rid of them as genetic competition, if you like. Second of all, that works just fine up until there's nobody to fight. If they don't have an enemy, then that energy is turned inward against the elder males, etc., the females and the children, and that violence, etc. We're about to find out where that goes. We're also now adding to this that the all-male army has a strong tendency towards homosexual activities, as opposed to homosexuality. And we'll point out about this, I suppose, within this chapter, that within the language, as we move forward, the all-male army, it's very much clear that Frank's talking about male homosexuality here and not female homosexuality for some reason. And so Idaho's response there, Idaho glared across the table at Moneo. I never, never what? I suppose I never, if we followed it on, it would be engaged in homosexual activities. Of course not. But yeah, not that I suppose the point is, was Duncan part of an all-male army? But it's about sublimation, about deflected energies, and all the rest of it. Moneo, I got, Carlos, I got that Moneo damn spell check. I got it was Moneo. Julian saying reliably unreliable. You can always count on Ch14 to lie. Yes, we've been talking a lot about the similarity, Julian, between the God Emperor and Old Harry from Old Harry's game, and they're very similar, very similar indeed, actually. Um, and a lot of the time, I think, a lot of the time, particularly with Old Harry and Old Harry's game, Satan, is that you kind of he's interesting. He's not quite the hero, but he kind of is. But you kind of root for him most of the time. But then sometimes he's an absolute. He really is the devil. He's a nasty little so and so, you know. And even as that's kind of with humor, if you like. But he's not 100% likable all the time, you know. Which is a weird thing to say. Baked Alaska Joe says, I'm a little confused. Did the Duncans come from the single source material after the Atreides defeat on Arrakis in the first book, or did the genetic material get updated with the lives of each Duncan? No, as far as we know, Baked Alaska Joe, all of the Duncans, right, all of the, oh, hang on. So Duncan Idaho, number one, the real Duncan Idaho, if you like, is killed on Arrakis. And then his body is taken by the Talaxi officer that kills him and sold to the Talaxi. And so they have it, at which point they make, for Dune Messiah, they make the hate ghola, which is a ghola of Duncan, but it's been altered. And that's the character that goes through to the children of Dune. Then that basically, those are two different individuals. From that point on, all of the Duncan Idahos are gholas of the very first one. Pardon me. And there is no connecting memory and no personal other memory for them. So it's basically a brand new Duncan each time, taken from the cells of the original. The one that's different is Hate, the second Duncan Idaho, the first Duncan Idaho ghola, if you like. But after that, all the rest of them, I think, are made to order specifically by the God Emperor. We're told at some point there, a little bit back, I think, that the Twi'leks who tried to make one a little bit different, but they all come from the same body, and they're taken from. I checked this recently. Sorry, I checked this recently for a viewer who was thinking that we were a bit wrong about this, and it is that they come from the cells of the original Duncan Idaho. So that's where the Duncan Idahos come from. The single source is the original Duncan Idaho's body, which the Twi'leks have. As to what happened to the other Hate ghola, I'm not too sure, but these Duncans don't come from him. Carlos saying, Joe, consensus is that he's from the cells of the original Duncan. There we go. The Big Alaska Joe says, oh, that would make sense as to why he wouldn't know how he dies each time. Yeah, we were talking about it the other week as well, that there's some things, there was a couple of mistakes possibly within the book. Certain events, I think, that he would have been unaware of. I think within this chapter, possibly, if I'm not mistaken, Moneo mentions Ganima and Hark al-Ada, and he wouldn't have met them, for example. And I think in the previous chapter we had a statement, something that Leto said, and was it like Paul said that once, something like that, and we checked and no, he didn't. But it was about the statement was about having a multitude, I think. And the thing is that, again, that the Idaho, I suppose, his memories up to the point of his death, he would have died before that happened. So there's a few things that are a little bit confusing. Unfortunately, Baked Alaska Joe, and occasionally that there are mistakes within the texts, as we've discovered to our chagrin. But yeah, and he asked a question in the previous chapter, by the way, something about why he couldn't remember. The different lives that he's had, and I think the answer was suggestive that it wasn't impossible, but that he wouldn't be the Duncan that he is if that had happened. So there's going to be, I suppose, changes with the Duncans as we go down. on down the book, you know. Carlos said would also ensure that he's as close to the original as possible, since cloning from clones leads to genetic drift in successive generations. Yes, this is going to be, I suppose, the Tylaxu problem, isn't it? And something said regarding Duncan's nightmare, I wonder if his fear of women, pardon me, women as other, also comes from his Tylaxu background. That's an interesting point. Big Lasky Joe sent something, a very good question. Something to do with his birthing process and the nature of the tanks, I suppose, that we have to find out about yet. Fear of women as other, also comes from his Tylaxia background. That's a good point. Could well do. Again, I suppose we haven't really started to hit the mystery of the Tylaxia women, have we? It all waits us. But yeah, why this particular nightmare at the start? It's a female army, isn't it? They're women. They're weaponless, but they're wearing armor. Wearing black armor would remind you of myrmidons. Rushing at him with the hoarse, mindless shouting of a mob, waving hands and moist those red blood. That's kind of what made me think of the Mayanids, you know, as they swarmed over him, their mouths open to display terrible fangs. It's a very sort of similar. If you'd be waking up from that, it would be like almost like you're having a dream that you were Orpheus and that you're about to meet your end, if you see what I mean, which is kind of what happens to him. Let me see very quickly. Orpheus. I love Orpheus in the Underworld. Orpheus in your decay. Death. Where are we? Pardon me, I need some fluids. According to a late antique summary of Aeschylus's lost play Bassarides, Orpheus, towards the end of his life, disdained the worship of all gods except Apollo. One early morning, he went to the oracle of Dionysus at Mount Pangaeum to salute this god at dawn, but was ripped to shreds by the Thracian Maionids for not honoring his previous patron Dionysus, and was buried in Pieria. It says, but having gone down into Hades because of his wife and seeing what sort of things were there, he did not continue to worship Dionysus, because of whom he was famous. But he thought Helios to be the greatest of the gods, Helios whom he also addressed as Apollo. Rousing himself each night towards dawn and climbing the mountain called Pangaeum, he would await the sun's rising so that he might see it first. Therefore Dionysus, being angry with him, said the Bassarides, as Aeschylus the tragedian says, they tore him apart and scattered the limbs. Let's see. Here his death is analogous with that of Pentheus, who was also torn to pieces by the Maionids, and it has been speculated that the Orphic mystery cult regarded Orpheus as a parallel figure to, or even an incarnation of, Dionysus. Both made similar journeys into Hades, and Dionysus Zagreus suffered an identical death. Pausanias writes that Orpheus was buried in Dion and that he met his death there. Oh, excuse me. He writes that the river Helicon sank underground when the women that killed Orpheus tried to wash off their blood-stained hands in its waters. Other legends claim that Orpheus became a follower of Dionysus and spread his cult across the land. In this version of the legend, it is said that Orpheus was torn to shreds by the women of Thrace for his inattention. What else have we got? Feeling spurned by Orpheus for taking only male lovers, Eromenoi, the Ciconian women followers of Dionysus, first threw sticks and stones at him as he played, but his music was so beautiful even the rocks and branches refused to hit him. Enraged, the women tore him to pieces during the frenzy of their Bacchic orgies. In Albrecht Dürer's drawing of Orpheus's death, based on an original now lost by Andrea Mantegna, a ribbon high in the tree above him is lettered Orpheus der erst Pursuren, Orpheus the first pederast. His head still singing mournful songs floated along with his lyre down the river Hebrus into the sea, after which the winds and waves carried them to the island of Lesbos. At the city of Methymna, there the inhabitants buried his head, and a shrine was built in his honor near Antissa. There his oracle prophesied until it was silenced by Apollo. In addition, the people of Lesbos, Greeks from Ionia and Anatolia, consulted the oracle, and his reputation spread as far as Babylon. Yeah, all sorts there. Horrific poems, etc. But that's the back eye. That's how he gets his. Basically, kind of, for want of a better word, I suppose, orgiastic, wild, cannibalistic, drunken women who you don't really want to meet. This idea of sublimation, by the way, sorry, we wanted to quickly chat about that. And that's kind of what our epigraph is referring to. Pardon me. Survival itself sometimes involves savage decisions, a kind of wanton brutality, which civilized humankind works very hard to suppress. What price will you pay for that suppression? Will you accept your own extinction? That little bit. So, sublimation, from the Latin sublimatio, sublimare, is a lifting up to raise something or to elevate it, from the root sublimis. In other words, lofty or high. And it's, in this case, it's going to be, we're going to chat about it in terms of, it's a term from psychology, but it actually is a term from alchemy. Oddly enough, if Julian was saying, we're going to have to start talking about, all of these kind of, Hermeticism, Gnosticism, esoteric magic, all of this kind of thing, alchemy and demonology. There's connections to the Dune series, and we've encountered some of this stuff before. So it's taken from alchemy, and it's generally to do with the sort of transmuting of one substance into another type of substance, if you like. And we do have a form of it within science, I suppose. So sublimation in science is the transition of a substance directly from the solid to the gas state. Originally, this idea is developed from ideas in alchemy. So sublimation in psychology, I've just taken some stuff from Wikipedia, but if you want to have a look at it, folks, is a defense mechanism in which socially unacceptable impulses or ideals are transformed into socially acceptable actions or behavior, resulting in a long-term conversion of the initial impulse. So what we've got here is with Freud, I suppose we have sublimation as the process of deflecting sexual instincts into acts of higher social valuation, being, and here we have the quote here, an especially conspicuous feature of cultural development. It is what makes it possible for higher physical activities, scientific, artistic, or ideological, to play such an important part in civilized life. That's taken from Siggy Freud's Civilization and Its Discontents, published in 1930. It's included in from the complete psychological works of Sigmund Freud, The Future of an Illusion, Civilization and Its Discontents, and Other Works. Translation by James Strachey, that's Hogarth Press, London, 1961, volume 21, 97 for that. So a general, I suppose, way of looking at it within psychology is translating a distressing desire into an acceptable form. Let's have a look. And essentially, that's what we're talking about with our male army here. Let's have a wee look. Sublimation. That's the wrong one. Let's have another look. Where are we? Psychology. Pardon me. See, just on the Wikipedia page, we've got Nietzsche's opinion on it here. There's, strictly speaking, neither unselfish conduct nor a wholly disinterested point of view. Both are simply sublimations in which the basic element seems almost evaporated and betrays its presence only to the keenest observation. All that we need, and that could possibly be given us in the present state of development of the sciences, is a chemistry of the moral, religious, aesthetic conceptions and feeling, as well as those emotions which we experience in the affairs, great and small, of society and civilization, and which we are sensible of even in solitude. But what if this chemistry established the fact that even in its domain, the most magnificent results were attained with the basest and most despised ingredients? Would many feel disposed to continue such investigations? Mankind loves to put the questions of its origin and beginning. Must one not be almost inhuman in order to follow the opposite course? So Siggy Freud there, and we've got Jung, I suppose, just in response to this. So sexual sublimation, according to Freud, is a deflection of sexual instincts into non-sexual activity based upon a principle akin to the conservation of energy in physics. In fact, his ideas are based on the idea of sublimation from alchemy. Let's just get down to Jung, why he doesn't like it. Let's see. Carl Gustav Jung argued that Freud's opinion can only be based on the totally erroneous supposition that the unconscious is a monster. It is a view that springs from fear of nature and the realities of life. Freud invented the idea of sublimation to save us from the imaginary claws of the unconscious. But what is real, what actually exists, cannot be alchemically sublimated, and if anything is apparently sublimated, it never was what a false interpretation took it to be. Let's see. The same article, it says Young goes on to suggest that unconscious processes become dangerous only to the extent that people repress them. The more people come to assimilate and recognize the unconscious, the less of a danger it becomes. In this view, sublimation requires not repression of drives through will, but acknowledgement of the creativity of unconscious processes and a learning of how to work with them. Jung criticized Freud for obscuring the alchemical origins of sublimation and for attempting instead to make the concept appear scientifically credible. So just in the last wee bit here, the sublimation is part of the royal art of where the true gold is made. Of this, Freud knows nothing. Worse still, he barricades all the paths that could lead to true sublimation. This is just about the opposite of what Freud understands by sublimation. It is not a voluntary and forcible channeling of instinct into a spurious field of application, but an alchemical transformation for which fire and prima materia are needed. Sublimation is a great mystery. Freud has appropriated this concept and usurped it for the sphere of the will and the bourgeois rationalistic ethos. Oh, these guys make me laugh. They really do. What's more is if anybody's interested, you can read the next thing, which is on Das Ding, by the French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan. And I was reading about that. And it's just the names for these things. I don't know. The more and more I read about psychology and psychoanalysis and stuff, the more and more I get a bit of a laugh out of it. I think it's a good giggle. So sublimation, the idea that we direct these activities, if you like, whatever they may be, into a more kind of into a certain, how is it put here? You deflect these activities into things like the arts or I don't know, arts and crafts, this kind of thing, scientific, artistic, ideological forms, if you want, activities. So that's what we're talking about. Frank is a fan of Carl Jung and so on. And just before we go on, so that was just really to sort of let you know what we're talking about. That's to do with the epigraph. The wanton brutality which civilized humankind works very hard to suppress. That's our sublimation. What price will you pay for that suppression? So what do we pay for it? For deflecting these energies, I suppose, that are violent, that are murderous, and that are a bit rapey, this kind of thing. Also, by the way, just for this, in relation to what Frank is talking about, I went for trying to get a little flow diagram. With our older males, younger males, females, youngs, and external army. Yeah, which was kind of interesting actually, just to have a wee look at. Now, where are we, folks? Oh, just that's where I think we're at. Yes, I just went through all that sublimation stuff. Of course, he's not. So we had prior to that, Duncan, I glared across the table at Moneo. I never, of course not. He's speaking about sublimation, about deflected energies, and all the rest of it. The rest of what? Idaho was prickly with anger at what he saw as an attack on his male self-image. So he is prickly, and I'd say he's defensive, and whatever. I don't know. It's interesting the way that the Idaho character is coming across here. And I suppose it's all about what's up with the female army, and why does he have a bother with that? If he's encountered probably Bene Gesserit before. And as was it Cynthia pointing out that this could be something to do with some sort of hangover from the Tleilaxu birthing tanks, if you like, his attitude towards women here. But it's certainly, from our point of view, women, it's the way it's bothering him. He's coming across as a bit misogynistic in general. At the same time, he's coming across as a bit homophobic as well with this conversation. Maybe that's the wrong term. He's certainly uncomfortable with it. The rest of what? He's prickly. He's angry, prickly with anger, and what he saw is an attack on his male self-image. So it's his sense of sexual self, if you like, his sense of virility, his manliness, that kind of thing. Pardon me. Adolescent attitudes, just boys together jokes. Sorry, pardon me, just boys together. Jokes designed purely to cause pain. Loyalty only to your packmates. Things of that nature. Idaho spoke coldly. What's your opinion? I remind myself, Moneo turned and spoke while looking out at the view, of something which he had said and which I am sure is true. That's right, I should have colored that in red. Let me just color that in red then. I'll just read that again, folks. I remind myself, Moneo turned and spoke while looking out at the view, of something which he had said and which I am sure is true. He is every soldier in human history. He offered to parade for me a series of examples, famous military figures who were frozen in adolescence. I declined the offer. I have read my history with care and have recognized this characteristic for myself. I've written next to that, whose history have you read? It's an interesting statement, and if it's the case, I suppose that Leto is behind pretty much every kind of history there is. He is in complete control of the narrative. The offer from Leto, I suppose, is should I parade some of these people would have lined up probably with whatever history it is that Moneo has read, and it's interesting that he might not have considered that the God Emperor would have written that history, because that's exactly what I think, that the God Emperor wrote it. He's sure that it's true. He is every soldier in human history. We know he's not. As I said, we've pretty much come to the conclusion he's not Duncan Idaho. He's certainly not him. He offered to pray from a series of examples, famous military figures who were frozen in adolescence. So this is the problem for the military figure, the fighting male, if you like. I declined the offer, and I've read my history with care. I have recognized this characteristic for myself. Fair enough. Moneo turned and looked directly into Idaho's eyes. Think about it, Commander. Idaho prided himself on self-honesty, and this hit him. Cults of youth and adolescence preserved in the military, it had the ring of truth. There were examples in his own experience. I've written next that such as question mark and then see note 34. Note 34 is his response to the all male among army has a strong tendency towards homosexual activities. I never, is what he said back then. And now we have it had the ring of truth. There were examples in his own experience. So I just thought, what's that about? Now, let's see. So, yeah. I've written down next this is Duncan. Some of this is actually seen as an attack against homosexual readers. See speech at UCLA, I think. Duncan is presented as homophobic, question mark. Immature response was at the zeitgeist. What about the Baron and loyalism? All to do with this adolescent attitudes, just boys together, jokes designed purely to cause pain, loyalty only to your packmates. But the statement beginning this, the all-male army has a strong tendency towards homosexual activities. It's how this is going to run on here. So cults of youth, adolescence preserved in the military. Yeah, they're preserved elsewhere as well, by the way. I suppose we can find them preserved, cults of youth within the church, within most religious groups. Let me see. Cults of youth, military, culture groups, religious, military. There was another one I was thinking on, which is going out of my head. As within the education, I suppose, is education system as well. Adolescence, cults of youth and adolescence preserved in the military. Even things like, I suppose, organizations like the Scouts within this country, the Scouts, things like the Boys Brigade and all of those kind of things, are linked into churches, but are also linked into the military, linked into cultural military history, this kind of thing. You can see that, particularly with the history of the Scouts. Paramilitary organizations and terrorist organizations also have youth cults. Got a whole bunch of them in this country as well. So examples in his own experience. Here we go. So this is the big one, I think. Here, this is the statement that's got all of the teeth in it, if you like. Moneo nodded. The homosexual, latent or otherwise, who maintains that condition for reasons which could be called purely psychological, tends to indulge in pain-causing behavior, seeking it for himself and inflicting it upon others. Lord Leto says this goes back to the testing behavior in the prehistoric pack. Do you believe him? I do. Idaho took a bite of the melon. It had lost its sweet savor. He swallowed and put down his spoon. I've written next that. Is that suggestive? Is this suggestive? Has male gayness spoiled Duncan Idaho's appetite? That's the second time he's got the melon there. The first time, if we go back a few pages, I've written melon number 1. He took a bite of the melon, found it ripened perfectly. The bite of the melon had lost its sweet savor. He put down his spoon. He's lost his appetite for this conversation. Well, let's have a look at this. First of all, the homosexual, latent or otherwise, who maintains that condition for reasons which can be called purely psychological, tends to indulge in pain-causing behavior, seeking it for himself. Okay, so first of all, we're not talking about female homosexuality, it's male homosexuality only, based on the language. Second of all, let's just running through this statement. Who maintains that condition for reasons? Now, what condition are we talking about? The condition that he's referring to, we've got to be careful as we go through this, the way Frank's broken it up, is to be frozen in adolescence, if you like, to not be able to get rid of adolescent attitudes, just boys together, jokes designed to cause pain, loyalty to your pack mates, this kind of thing. So that's the condition. The homosexual, latent or otherwise, who maintains that condition, that type of adolescence, where are we? For reasons which can be called purely psychological. What does that mean? Not too sure. Reasons that are purely psychological. I've written next to that, so vague. What does this mean? Psychology pertaining to the psyche, pertaining to the mind. Pseudoscientific. What? it's a vagary, isn't it? What on earth does that mean? Purely psychological. Um, I'm going to say purely to do with states of the mind or something like that, I think is what Frank's trying to say here. So next thing we have tends to indulge in pain-causing behavior. Tends to, so the tendency is not an absolute. To indulge in something is to allow yourself to how would you put it, to understand the pleasure of a thing. Does that make sense? To enjoy a thing. To indulge in it is to enjoy it. To allow oneself to enjoy the pleasure of the thing. So this is tends to enjoy. Tends to indulge in pain-causing behavior, seeking it for himself and inflicting it upon others. So seeking it for himself again. We have the male term there. Pain-causing behavior. I suppose we have murder and causing injury, rape, mutilation, etc., torture, this kind of thing. Totally left out torture there. This is the kind, to take pleasure in it, first of all. Seeking it for himself, so that's in other words masochistic behavior, or inflicting it upon others, therefore sadistic behavior, sadism and masochism. And then let's see. So the homosexual, latent or otherwise, who maintains the condition of adolescence, for want of a better term, for reasons that are purely psychological. That's the bit I'm having a bit of a bother with now. I've written at the bottom of the page here, Peter Pan is the best thing I can come up with there. Tends to indulge in pain-causing behavior. So either for someone who basically stays as an adolescent in a kind of military way, ends up becoming either a masochist. And sorry, this is specifically about homosexual people, homosexual latent or otherwise, who maintains the condition for reasons that are psychological, indulges in pain-causing behavior, seeking it for himself, so masochistic and sadistic behavior. Lord Leto says this goes back to the testing behavior of the prehistoric pack. Now, the prehistoric pack, I suppose, before history, simply put, back to a point where we were unable to inquire into it because of evidence, or that's how convenient. Testing behavior, things, I suppose, like rites of, the rites of passage. I'm trying to think of, I suppose the one example I would think of most, it's not really the same thing, but is the agoge, for example, of Spartan boys. Let's have a look at that. No, but that's certainly not prehistoric. Agoge was the training program prerequisite for Spartiate citizen status. Spartiate class boys entered it at the age of 7 and would stop being a student of the Agoge at the age of 21. It's considered violent by the standards of the day, was sometimes fatal. Those who survived to the final stage and around the age of 18 to 19 will have the chance to be selected into the Cryptea. There's a fair bit about it there, etc., etc. There's another one, I think, to do with, let's have a wee look. I think one from Apollodorus. Let's have a look at Laius. Laius, of course, is the character that lines up with the Baron Harkonnen the most. Did we have a thing there a moment ago about Orpheus being the first pederast? I suppose it actually says here this Laius is considered by many to be the originator of pederastic love and the first pederastic rapist. Sorry, that's for his kidnapping of Chrysippus. If anybody wants to, all of those stories are kind of on my the videos I did on the Pelopids. It's in there. No, it's probably in the book. Bear with me a wee second. Where would you be? Elias Polydorus, there you are. I might be thinking, maybe got the wrong book. It might be Robert Graves. Let's have a wee quick look, folks. Hopefully, less. So land of cost 103, 105. Bear with me a sec. Something to do with I don't know, a regiment of soldiers. Bear with me, 103. Might not be this. I'll maybe look it up for you for next time, just so we don't have too much dead air. Where are you? Come on. 105, 106. Games for 137. Bear with me. Maybe it's something else I'm thinking of. I'm actually thinking. Sorry, I'll look for it and see if I can find it the next time. I'm actually thinking it's probably Robert Graves, actually. But I thought that he'd founded some sort of regiment in Corinth. Let me see. No, that's something else. There's one to look at as the Sacred Band of Thebes. It was an elite heavy infantry of select soldiers consisting of 150 pairs of male couples, 300 men in total. Organized by age, they formed the elite force of the Theban army in the 4th century BC. First organized under Commander Gorgidas in 378 BC under Pelopidas, played a crucial role in the Battle of Leuctra. It was annihilated by Philip II of Macedon and young Alexander the Great in the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC. It's not what I was looking for. I'll have a wee look at it. Something to do with Laius in particular, but Wikipedia is not showing what I'm after. Let's have a wee look. So, yes, indeed, that's that little section broken up. So what do we basically... the prehistoric rites of passage, I'm thinking, I don't know, I suppose they go, the one it could be just sort of ceremonial kind of stage, passing into manhood, do this kind of thing, etc., etc. Yeah. This is so Lord Leto says this goes back to the testing behavior in the prehistoric pack. So this Lord Leto's curious theory as it's being developed, I suppose. It's almost going from stepping stones, isn't it, from one point to the other. So the all-male army, we get, they're problematic, too dangerous to support, to its civilian support base. The older males sending the younger males into battle, etc., etc. When it's denied an external enemy, the all-male army turns against its own population. Always. All male armies have a strong tendency towards homosexual activities. Have this thing about sublimation, and then adolescent attitudes, then the individuals that are frozen in adolescence. Are these such dangerous people, if you like? And then the homosexual, latent or otherwise, that association with the army there, who maintains that condition, that is that adolescent condition, for psychological reasons, whatever they happen to be, indulges in sado or masochistic, pain-causing behavior, either sadistic or masochistic. And it goes back to a prehistoric pack mentality, testing, screening for warriors, this kind of thing. I think the suggestion is it could also be something like, eugenics, that you find in the ancient world, that kind of thing. Commonly, babies being left out for exposure, and the Spartans kind of doing that sort of thing as well. So that's a fair amount there, and I'm going to see if I can just catch up with your comments, but see where we got to. There we are. I think that's where it is. I'll start there in a wee second. So that's what I've got. So I've just put what Frank thinks here at the bottom of this. So latent or manifest homosexuality becomes sadomasochistic in army males when they are kept in an adolescent state, as there's no sublimation. I've written down here, what about public schools, for example? You'll get a discussion like this in Old Harry's game. Male and female only. We've got the World Wide Web and Internet not being around at this time. What about women who indulge in sadomasochistic practices, etc., etc.? There's all sorts of things to kind of break this down with. But essentially, that's what Frank, or the God Emperor, is presenting to us in terms of the problems with an all-male army. And we've got to combine that in with the information that he's presented to us in the previous chapter, and sort of not really presented to Duncan Idaho about the all-female army. The contrast, if you like. What pain-causing, murder, death, kill, rape, this kind of thing for the males, and we have that the women are, how is it put? The genesis of life, is it something like that? Genesis of creativity that they have, that they're more focused on kind of life and preserving life and that kind of thing. That's the difference between, they mature differently. But goodness. Dear, oh dear. Right, sorry. Okay, let's see. Julian said the genes of all the Duncans gets mixed into the final Duncan we see in the last books, Duncan Omega. And Cynthia says, by keeping the original Duncan, Leto refuses to suppress this particular survivor of the distant past. Is it the job of the fish speakers to continually suppress this primitive specimen? And Big Alaska Joe says the ultimate Duncan. That's a good one. Something, is it their job to continually suppress this primitive specimen to keep him in his place? I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Again, the need for the Duncan, and particularly with the fish speakers, I'm kind of not quite sure about that myself. Carl also said, I brought up the point before that other memories should end at the moment of birth, if not conception. Yeah, once you put a little bit of thought into it, it doesn't make any sense, really, does it? But we have to suspend our disbelief, Carlos, I think, Since by continuing, I mean generation after generation, does Leto use this ongoing response to Duncan to help shape the new civilization? Duncan isn't a seeker. Julian saying after peace. I guess that Leto wants to recreate that spot. Ongoing response. I don't know. Is it? What's the point of the Duncans? I mean, you're asking there, Cynthia. Generation after generation, using this ongoing response to help Duncan shape the new civilization. And I get this. It's almost like he's a witness, isn't he? He's a witness to another time. He's the only person that could really compare and contrast this. I've also got a sense that that whatever it is, that there's a big kind of Duncan Idaho type gap in the God Emperor's mind, if you like, that he's not there. And I think that might be something important as well. I think ultimately that why do we need the Duncans, to keep coming along? Is I think he needs. I think the main quality that they have is that they're rebellious, and in a universe of such order and control that there's not going to be much rebellion, even though we have one going on. And I think there's actually plenty of people being rebellious, if you like, but they have to be very careful around the God Emperor. Possibly again his ability to surprise. Duncan isn't a seeker. Julian said Duncan isn't a seeker after peace. I guess that Leto wants to recreate that spunk. Carl says something. I think I remember Leto saying that he used Duncan as a way to determine he was still on the golden path somehow. Duncan would inevitably rebel against him if he kept to the path. So he's like a control for the whole thing. So this in Carlos, I agree. It seemed that the Bene Gesserit have a better method for the Reverend Mothers, passing the memories of one's entire life from one Reverend Mother to another during the spice trance. So they said Freud's Moses and monotheism argues that the ancient Israelites built their whole society in an attempt to cover their guilt for having murdered Moses. Don't know if I agree, but it's a good read. Moses and monotheism. Okay. I'm not sure if I consider Moses real or not. I'll have to look into him a bit more. Built their whole society in an attempt to cover their guilt for having murdered Moses. Don't know if I agree, but it's a good read. Moses and monotheism. Fair enough. Oh, what was it? That thing just made me laugh so much when I was reading it. What's this new psychological theory? Oh, it's about the thing, is it? And it just made me laugh. I was thinking about things, the terms like the end and stuff, the it, the thing, and just thought, oh my God, psychology really does need a better set of language to it. Investigation into these interesting European terms reveals that they're, oh my goodness. Just reminds me of my son saying, things and stuff. That kind of thing, Carl says, I guess from Leto or the Bene Gesserit viewpoint, homosexuality would be an undesirable trait as it would eliminate bloodlines from the gene pool. Julian says, Duncan has the juice, the mojo, the spark, the ability to jump into situations without hesitation. He also has a reinfusion of genes as a way to keep humanity at a genetic baseline to keep them human. Yeah, I suppose the other thing we get a sense of, particularly from the fish speakers, is that we have gone down 3,500 years. We're in a new civilization. A lot can happen and change within that time. And it looks like humanity is changing. And it's quite possible that what we need the Duncans for is a good old bit of the old-fashioned DNA. It almost sounds a bit Buck Rogers in the 25th century. I used to love that that was the whole, particularly Princess Ardala, wasn't it? Was just hot for Buck Rogers' DNA. Looking back at Buck Rogers, goodness gracious me, Buck Rogers in the 25th century. I know he was feeling a bit out of his time and a bit down, but the resistance that man has to those women is outrageous. It's to the point that I think we would have to reevaluate Buck Rogers' sexuality. I think. Oh dear. Very good. So we have Duncan saying, I will have to think about this, Idaho said. Of course. You're not eating, Idaho said. I was up before dawn and ate then. Moneo gestured at his plate. The women continually try to tempt me. I've just made a wee note here, women as temptress, and we also had that comment from him earlier about the damned women. Just there, they're always trying to tempt me. Do they ever succeed? Occasionally. It's almost like a nudge. The food temptation, then back to the male army. I suppose, is the other little comment that I've made here. He's kind of breaking this conversation up a bit with food and the back and forth, if you like. It's an interesting wee technique with writing here, and it's kind of I think this kind of scene is a bit like the banquet scene you get in Dune. It's done much more. I don't know, it's done particularly well there. I think when you want to get a lot of ideas out, I think Frank likes to do it over food here. But I think it works better when you've got more characters. So do they ever succeed? Occasionally. You're right. I find his theory curious. Is there more to it? So back to it, clearly. Moneo says, he says that when it breaks out of the adolescent homosexual restraints, the male army is essentially rapist. Rape is often murderous, and that's not survival behavior. So I'll just scribble down rape from the Latin verb rapeo, to seize, to take, to carry away, via the Middle English rapin or rapin, which has the same meaning as the above, to seize, take, carry away. I've written a question mark, a question next to this. Is war survival behavior? First of all, it says rape. This comment about rape. Where are we? The adolescent homo. Once I'll read that again. Sorry. He says that when it breaks out of the adolescent homosexual restraints, the male army is essentially rapist. Rape is often murderous, and that's not survival behavior. So I've written next that, well, what essentially we're saying here is that when not murderous, rape is survival behavior, because when we go to a genetic viewpoint, the perpetrator has passed on their genes or has had a chance to pass them on. When murderous, I suppose from this point, rape is often murderous, therefore the perpetrator does not pass on their genes, therefore it's not survival behavior, is what I think Frank's getting at there. No, it depends on how I suppose the survival behaviors, if do we look at things in terms of passing one's DNA on, that kind of acts, particularly in the face of death. The male army is essentially rapist. There's not an army I think that's ever existed that hasn't been a bit rapey in warfare. Not survival, but it's an interesting way of putting it, isn't it? It's not a particularly nice subject. Idaho scowled. A tight smile flitted across Moneo's mouth. Lord Leto says that only Atreides' discipline and moral restraints prevented some of the worst excesses in your times. A deep sigh shook Idaho. And I've written next to this, is this true? And I've written underneath it, I doubt it. And does Moneo get this? So in other words, we're getting this statement about all armies, all men, these kind of broad statements, that the male army becomes homosexual, otherwise these people will get this pain-causing behavior, that the argument's carried on whenever the individuals break out of the adolescent homosexual restraints. So being frozen in the adolescent, if you like, that the homosexual restraints is that these behaviors within the military tend to be kept hush-hush on the QT, and whenever we get out, the male army is essentially rapist. Pardon me. When it breaks out, I think that's is it when it engages in warfare. And doesn't have, from the psychological point of view, doesn't have the restraints, if you like, of this idea of sublimation, deflecting these energies. And again, with our epigraph at the start here, what price do you pay for that suppression? Will you accept your own extinction? If you're deflecting this behavior away and away from, I suppose, whenever your army gets out and does its job against the enemy, what happens when your army comes home? And essentially, I don't know, in a funny way, I think some of what Frank is talking about is what happens to soldiers whenever they're demobbed. In some ways, I think that the idea of what's happened to them in war, but ultimately what happens, what do you do with your soldiers once they cease to be, in a war environment? And there's a bit more to it, as Frank points out here. I think we've got examples of the Romans, for example, what they do with their soldiers. Tend to become colonial farmers, for example. The British often end up putting their military after major battles, etc., into policing organizations and stuff, having them police the colonies. We've got a bit of that over in Ireland's history with things like the B Specials and the Black and Tans in particular, I think. Let me see. Black and Tans were a British temporary police force recruited in 1920 to 1921 to fight the IRA during the Irish War of Independence. Composed largely of British World War I veterans, they became infamous for harsh reprisals against civilians, including arsons and killings. The name arose from their mismatched dark green RIC uniforms and khaki army trousers. So soldiers pulled out of combat do not make out of recent combat make very bad policemen, basically. And tend to be still in that kind of murder, death, kill kind of mode, if you know what I mean. Right, let's see. So Leto says that only Atreides' discipline and moral restraints prevented some of the worst excesses in newer times. The suggestion that the Atreides don't do this kind of thing, I don't know. I don't believe it for a second. They may have the discipline, moral restraints. I think maybe not as much under the Atreides as you might get with the Harkonnens or something. But I'd still say it happens, and I think Idaho's response here suggests that that's the case. A deep sigh shook Idaho. Moneo sat back, thinking of a thing the God Emperor had once said. No matter how much we ask after the truth, self-awareness is often unpleasant. We do not feel kindly toward the truth, sir. That's the unexamined life is not worth living. That kind of thing. To be, understand yourself, to look inside yourself, to know who you are. Understand all your foibles and your problems and your, all of this kind of thing. It's not easy. It's never altogether pleasant, but it's useful, I suppose. Those damned Atreides, Idaho said. I'm Atreides. What? Idaho was shocked. His breeding program, Moneo said. I'm sure the Talaxu mentioned it. I am directly descended from the mating of his sister and Hark al-Ada. As I made a wee note here, his sister's Ganima, Hark al-Ada's Farad'n. Idaho would not know either of those people. He died before they were born. Both of them. As far as I can tell, yeah. So we've jumped out of this subject then of the male army. We've gone into the genes of the breeding program now. Ivan Atreides, what? Idaho was shocked. His breeding program, Moneo said. I'm sure the Talaxu mentioned it. I'm directly descended from the mating of his sister and Hark al-Ada. Idaho leaned toward him. Then tell me, Atreides, how are women better soldiers than men? They find it easier to mature. Idaho shook his head in bewilderment. They have a compelling physical way of moving from adolescence into maturity, Moneo said. As Lord Leto says, carry a baby in you for 9 months, and that changes you. That's quite funny. Idaho sat back. What does he know about it? Moneo merely stared at him until Idaho recalled the multitude in Leto, both male and female. The realization plunged over Idaho. Moneo saw it, recalling a comment of the God Emperor's, your words brand him with the look you want him to have. So say nothing then. As the silence continued, Moneo cleared his throat. Presently, he said, the immensity of the Lord Leto's memories has been known to stop my tongue, too. Is he being honest with us? I believe him. No, just to stop there for a wee minute. Atreides hire women better soldiers than men. My understanding, by the way, is that certainly within one field, female fighter pilots are better than men because they can take more G's. Apparently, um, there's always something, I think, isn't there? Hire women better soldiers than men. This is about maturity and the movement from adolescence into maturity. And the problem with the men that we've been presented with, this homosexual, sadomasochistic, murderous rapist from the male army, is that one of the causes for this is that they're frozen in adolescence. This is one of the core differences in the army here. The males can be frozen in adolescence. The females, why do women make better soldiers than men? They find it easier to mature, Moneo says. They have a compelling physical way of moving from adolescence into maturity. So that's one of the key differences there. That the buzzword there was adolescence, I suppose, what we were looking for. Whereas the males who end up this way, that the God Emperor is discussing in this manner, that these two are chatting about, are frozen in adolescence. So, and then Moneo says, as long as Lord Leto says, carry a baby in you for 9 months and that changes. I've written next, that's a very female other memory response, isn't it? And it's kind of funny thinking about it. It's almost as if you could imagine Moneo remembering it and Leto going, if you carried a baby as a big worm. I find it quite a funny thing. And Idaho's response is kind of amusing as well. What does he know about it? And then the whole always been all these women, that has to sink in. I think it's quite funny. Your words, I think, brand him with the look you want him to have. So he says nothing. Is he being honest with us? At this point, the answer is no. At the very minimum, he's been incredibly evasive, I think. Moneo says, I believe him. And I've written next to that he shouldn't. A belief does not equal knowledge, I suppose. But on we go. How are we doing? We're not doing too bad. This is Duncan. But he does so many. I mean, take this breeding program. How long has that been going on? From the very first, from the day he took it away from the Bene Gesserit. What does he want from it? I wish I knew. But you're an Atreides and his chief aide. Yes, you haven't convinced me that a female army is best. They continue the species. So he's still fixated on this, Duncan. And I suppose the other thing that we should know is that Moneo doesn't know what the goals of the breeding program are. So you haven't convinced me that a female army is best. They continue the species. At last, I've written next to that, not necessarily on their own, but at last, Idaho's frustration and anger had an object. Is that what I was doing with them that first night? Breeding? Possibly. The fish speakers take no precautions against pregnancy. Damn him! I'm not some animal he can move from stall to stall like a stud. Yes. But the Lord Leto refuses to follow the Talaxia pattern of gene surgery and artificial insemination. What have the Talaxia got to? They are the object lesson. Even I can see that. Their face dancers are mules, closer to a colony organism than to humans. Those others of me, were any of them his studs? Some. You have descendants. Who? I am one. So before we push on, I thought that was very funny. Very funny. And I think certainly if you were doing this, filming this, it should be played for laughs. I think this whole so what we get from that is that Duncan has had sex with the fish speakers his first night here. Although the previous night he's turned them down, but on the first night he has had sex with some fish speakers. Is that what I was doing with them the first night? Breeding? Possibly. I think the next bit's quite one of those kind of funny double takes. The fish speakers take no precautions against pregnancy. If you were filming this, I'd have Duncan drinking out of a cup at that point and just spraying it everywhere. Damn him! I'm not some animal he can move from stall to stall like a like a stud. Yes, it's the exclamation mark. I think it's a great piece of writing, and I think it's very very funny. Dear oh dear. Dun, 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 dun. So, but the Lord Leto refuses to follow Tylaxu pattern of gene surgery and artificial insemination. So we get a little bit more about what's going on with the Tylaxu. There's no mention here of the axolotl tanks. And with Moneo saying this, the Lord Leto refuses to follow the Tylaxu pattern of gene surgery and artificial insemination. We're going to get an explanation for that. But the question is, does he? Who knows? What have the Tylaxu got to? They are the object lesson in terms of their population, their evolution, their breeding. Even I can see that. Their face dancers are mules, closer to a colony organism than to humans. So I was wondering how so. Those others of me, were any of them his studs? Some you have descendants who I am one. Now I've written next to this, is this true? See note 65 in this chapter, so we'll chat about it whenever we get there. But it's an admission here by Moneo that he's one of he is a descendant of Duncan. You have descendant, so yeah, that he is a descendant of Duncan. Idaho stared into Moneo's eyes, lost suddenly in a tangle of relationships. Idaho found the relationships impossible to understand. Moneo was so much older than, but I am, which of them was truly the older? Which the ancestor and which the descendant? I sometimes have trouble with this myself, Moneo said. If it helps, the Lord Leto assures me that you are not my descendant, not in any ordinary sense. However, you may well father some of my descendants. Idaho shook his head from side to side. Sometimes I think only the God Emperor himself can understand these things, Moneo said. That's another thing, Idaho said. This God business. The Lord Leto says he has created a holy obscenity. And I've written here, C note 75, chapter 13. I'll tell you what, folks, if you'll excuse me a wee second, I'm going to quickly run to the loo. That's a good wee point for the stop, and then I'll just bring that up whenever we get back. I'll quickly catch up with your comments. I'll be right back, folks. Excuse me one wee second. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. Yeah, I'll quickly catch up with your comments here. Let's see. Jeremy said there's something in Duncan's genes that Leto wants in the whole species. He's breeding the species with one man. Black and Tans famously trundled into a Gaelic football match and mowed down civilians in this period. Yeah, I've never. It's a good. It's just an example, I think, of taking an army, demobbing it, and putting it into a policing situation where you end up with that army behaving, that force behaving like the military. Of course, you should never use the army against your own people. Armies are for being used against other people, if you like. June said, I've never alchemically considered the specific idea of sublimation. Yeah, its origins, it seems, come from that. It's another example of psychology, I suppose. It's maybe to a degree iconotropy, using unscientific, mythological, these kind of things, and saying, oh, that kind of thing. It's just, I don't know. I suppose an attempt. There's a lot of just let's name stuff, isn't it, these days? An attempt at explaining a type of behavior, But yeah, that's kind of what. Just reading through the article on Wikipedia, that's let me see if we get Jung's problem with it with Freud is that he'd tried to hide the fact that he got this idea from alchemy, and therefore that had ruined its credibility, if you like. It was an interesting little thing. As I said, that I read on about Das Ding on that. It just made me laugh so much. No disrespect intended, really, but it was just funny. I don't know, when you figure out some words and what they mean, it's just what's this about, Lord Leto says he has created a holy obscenity. Just before I popped out there, I said C note 75, chapter 13. So let's go. Where's my notes? I've pointed out something. Oh yes, this is the point where Duncan and Leto talking. Duncan said, and you let them believe you're a god. I don't think I like this. And Leto had responded, the curse of holiness is offensive to me as it is to you. And I'd written next to that, is that true at that time? Here we have Lord Leto says he has created a holy obscenity. The religion that has evolved around him, that has grown around him, it's his creation again. And once again, I suppose if we think about it, just in terms of how Leto II is so utterly controlling the narrative within this universe, in every shape and form. By the look, so as I said, we've talked about the actual histories, reports, government reports, this kind of thing, the oral tradition, pretty much everything. And here we have again the God business, if you like, but he's this creation of the religion that he has around him. The power structures, the narratives that they put out are all under his control. So Moneo's response to this, that's another thing Idaho said, this God business. The Lord Leto says he has created a holy obscenity. This was not the response Idaho had expected. What did I expect? A defense of Lord Leto. I kind of went, yes, actually, I would. Holy obscenity, Moneo repeated. The words rolled from his tongue with a strange sense of gloating in them. I've wondered why is he gloating in relation to those words. The Lord Leto says he has created a holy obscenity. I think that this is because these are Lord Leto's words. It's almost, isn't that great? I don't know. It's again almost a paradoxical statement, isn't it? Almost oxymoronic. Idaho focused a probing stare on Moneo. And we get his thoughts here. He hates his god emperor. No, he fears him. But don't we always hate what we fear? I'm sure I've heard that before within the Dune series, and I'm pretty sure I said no at the time, and I've also written next to it, no, we don't always hate what we fear. It's fine to have, perfectly normal fear of certain things. Part of your sort of natural defense mechanism. But there's, there could be things that could cause me harm, but there's no point in hating it, is it? Especially if it's like a runaway inanimate object or something. So I don't think we always hate what we fear, not at all. His thoughts here with he hates his God Emperor. No, he doesn't. He fears him. Yes, he does. And we always hate what he fears. No, he does not hate. He does fear. He is afraid of Leto. I think to a degree, though, it's more of I don't want to get squished. I get the sense from Moneo that he's not afraid of death or anything like that, but I think he possibly is afraid of an ignoble death. The way that one of the Duncans goes, this kind of thing. Why do you believe in him? Idaho demanded. You ask if I share in the popular religion? No. Does he? I think so. Why? Why do you think so? Because he says he wishes to create no more face dancers. He insists that his human stock, once it has been paired, breeds in the way it has always bred. What the hell does that have to do with it? You ask me what he believes in. I think he believes in chance. I think that's his God. That's superstition. No, it's not really. Considering the circumstances of the Empire, a very daring superstition. Idaho glanced at Moneo. You damned Atreides, he muttered. You'll dare anything. Moneo noted that there was dislike mixed with admiration in Idaho's voice. The Duncans have all, Moneo's thoughts here just to end the chapter. The Duncans always begin that way. And I'm kind of wondering, was it this dislike with admiration? Again, kind of a paradoxical, almost oxymoronic, isn't it? They're almost opposites. These dichotomies that we're getting, I think are quite interesting. It's a great chapter. It's a heavy one in terms of the ideas that are thrown out of it. And we're not quite sure really what to make. Although I think, like Duncan, we need to process it a bit. But this idea of the nature of the male army being, oh goodness, we kind of paraphrased it, didn't we, there somewhere, being fundamentally, I suppose, when locked in an adolescent mode. What was it we said there? So latent or in terms of the male-only army, latent or manifest homosexuality becomes sadomasochistic in army males when they are kept in an adolescent state, as there is no sublimation. In other words, they don't proceed from into a mature state, if you like. Just in relation to the comments, and there's a whole sort of thing within that about breaking out of adolescent homosexual restraints. The male army is essentially rapist. I suppose you can see how gay people could be offended by some of this. In relation to the comments made about this, I suppose in terms of homosexuality, right at the very start of the book, I scribbled a few things down here in relation to Frank's ideas. Frank, having served in the military briefly in the Seabees, I think, because he was drafted for World War II. So he has an involvement with the military there. And I suppose also in relation to homosexuality, the main thing with Frank is his relationship with his son, Bruce, which doesn't go particularly well. Just in terms of our timeline with some of the ideas, this book's first published in 1981. HIV/AIDS, just in terms of the zeitgeist, if you like, is first in the press in May 1981, first clinically reported in June 1981. The term AIDS kind of hits the population and the general consciousness, if you like, in 1982. Proper naming of HIV isn't until 1986. when Rock Hudson, I suppose, was the famous Hollywood star, I suppose, that announced that he had the virus. That was on the 25th of July, 1985. Pardon me. We've got Bruce Calvin Herbert's dates on it from 1951 to 1993. So he lived past his father. And Frank died in 1986, didn't he? So another sort of 7 years past that. He died from AIDS-related pneumonia. He was a gay rights activist. He ran an electronics store. I've got his obituary here somewhere. Bear with me a second. Oh, here it is. If anybody would like to hear it. Bruce C. Herbert, electronics. This is his obituary. Electronic enthusiast Bruce C. Herbert of San Rafael died at home Tuesday, June the 15th, 1993 of pneumonia as a result of AIDS. He was 41. He was born in Santa Rosa in 1951 to science fiction author Frank Herbert and advertising manager Beverly Herbert. Mr. Herbert graduated from Sir Francis Drake High School. As a youngster, he developed an interest in electronics and became devoted to the field. At the age of 13, he built his own radio station at home in Fairfax. Eventually, he owned a radio and television repair company, Starburst Electronics in Fairfax, and worked for a television station in the Midwest. He also worked creating and marketing computer software and was a professional photographer specializing in video work. An activist in the gay community, Mr. Herbert was a member of a number of organizations, including the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. He loved music, books, and good conversation. He was an accomplished cook. He is survived by a brother, Brian Herbert of Bellevue, Washington, a sister, Penny Merritt of Florence, Oregon, and several nieces and nephews. Private services will be held. There we go. That's the obituary for Bruce Calvin Herbert. Pardon me. Very quickly, let me just bring this up in relation to this. I suppose that I think we've had a wee chat about it before. Let's see, I've got it copied into something I was writing about the Baron. So it was in relation to this, I suppose that yeah, we've got a question and answer session. This is from the University of California in Los Angeles, UCLA. On the 4th of April, 1985, we have the transcript here. It's one of the ones that we have up on the audio. Let's see. I can probably get you a link for it. It's on YouTube. There we go. Folks, that's it there. Interview with Frank. So this is just in relation to some of the stuff here. Mr. Herbert, I'm on your right. This is the questioner. Frank says, okay, over there. Yeah, as a major author of great creativity and insight, you have gained the respect of millions, yet. And Frank says, gee, watch out for my head. It's coming up like a balloon. I think it's going to go down in a sec. It says, yet you have chosen to cast token gay characters in a negative light. The images that you present in your popular work, Dune, and its movies specifically, can only, and Frank interrupts him there and says, well, I didn't do the movie, understand that, can only promote bigotry and violence against lesbians and gay men, and silence. So Frank's response here was, of course, what I was doing with the gay population there, I was only saying one thing. I was saying that homosexuality is a natural occurrence in our society, and your teens are naturally this way, and some people are beyond, and primitive societies have dealt with it in a different way than our society deals with it. And lots of times we create the aberrant gay. And there are aberrant gays just as there are aberrant other individuals by our social reactions to them. And I just gave you an aberrant gay in the Dune books. But what I was also saying to you was that sadomasochism sometimes is a part of this. I can give you a chapter and verse on that. And that gays have a much harder problem coming out of the social pressures than the rest of us do in many instances. But I didn't have anything else in mind with this. That was what I was doing. And the questioner says, well, I hope that in the future, that you portray in any books that you do write in the future, do in fact, Frank interrupts him a wee bit, but there's another thing I was saying. Just to finish what the questioner says here, do in fact responsibly represent lesbians and gays in a manner consistent with your non-lesbian, non-gay characters. And here we get Frank going on saying, well, there's another thing I was saying, is that the gays have opted to not continue the species. That's just true. Now, yeah, well, it's a choice anybody can make. I've made that choice with my new lady because there's enough of us already. I mean, I didn't. I had 3 children and a 35-year marriage, and my wife died. I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. And someone says, excuse me, and then the third question says that gays haven't opted for anything. Sexual orientation is a natural part of myself. I didn't choose to be gay. I just am gay. Frank says, of course, that's what I'm saying. A person doesn't choose. It happens, but it happens for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it happens for psychological reasons. That's the reason we were given here, wasn't it, in this chapter? The psychological reasons. We were kind of going, well, what the hell does that mean? The questioner continues, says, we're just the way we are. And secondly, I happen to know many gay people being openly gay people who are not safe to be as open with me. And most gay people have nothing against children. Most gay people even want their own children. So what just said, Frank says, well, it's a lot more difficult. That is going to be a sensation. So that's that. Just reading through the transcript of that, that will be the third questioner at this question and answer session at University of California, Los Angeles. Again, that's 1985. Frank's not too well at that point, as you can tell by listening to the interview. As I said, just in terms of where things are at, 1985. I suppose, well, this is April, so Rock Hudson wouldn't even have announced that he had the virus at this point. There's no name for HIV at this point, etc., etc. And these are, I suppose, the interesting thing that both neither questioner or Frank will admit to that the problem with the Baron is that he's a paedophile. Essentially, I think, because if you actually listen to him, so why can't you? We've just heard a lot of strange stuff here about homosexuality within the military, how it makes you rapey, all of this kind of stuff. It's how would I put it? Oh, for God's sake, I've just lost my train of thought there. Oh goodness, what can somebody remember what I was thinking about there for a second? Let me think. Hang on. God, I hate that. You don't hate that when that happens. You've got your mind running and just you've lost your train of thought. Just I think we were talking prior to that just about what's known within attitudes towards homosexuality, etc., within the 1980s. Oh yeah. The general thing, I suppose, is that these are general statements about the military, the male within the male army, etc. We've had a look at exploration of male violence within the Dune series prior to this. But yeah, the problem that the person suggests in what we were reading there is that the gay characters, lesbian gay characters, etc., aren't as fleshed out as the other characters. In relation to what they're talking about, as far as I can tell, the only really well fleshed out character that up to this point that is homosexual is the Baron. And for that questioner to say, could you not make your other characters as, I don't know, as well written as, could you not make your gay characters as well written as your other characters? I think there's something just nonsensical about that. Because the Baron is an exceptionally well-written character. He's a tip-top villain, if you like. The real problem, I suppose, and partly with what Frank, I think that the attitude within the questioner there and how this was perceived. And whenever Frank is answering there, by the way, the whole idea that gays have chosen to opt out of reproduction, that kind of gets a bit of a boo from the audience. He's not talking, he's not preaching to the converted, to put it that way. Yeah, the point that the questioner is making is that, can you not write, the thing is, he has written an exceptionally well written homosexual character. The real problem, and it's the elephant in the room that neither person will say the word there, is that he's a paedophile. The term is aberrant, isn't it? As much as it's the pain-causing behavior, the sadomasochism, I don't think there's much masochistic about the Baron. He is, well, maybe with the food eating, I suppose, but he is definitely a sadist, you know. So it was just, I felt just to point out there that that's, partly I think this writing of this passage has kind of made some people a bit prickly about it, but the suggestion that the Baron as the only real gay character we've seen so far is badly written, isn't as well fleshed out as the straight characters, this kind of thing, is absolute nonsense. He's fantastically fleshed out. He's he's all flesh, isn't he? But he is an exceptionally well crafted and well written character. And as I said, neither the aberration that people are talking about there is that he's a paedophile. I was going to do a sort of video on this. The reason that he's a paedophile is that he is based on Elias, who we were talking about, which is the guy I was trying to find you a reference to. His finding of a regiment of boys. The military, we were even talking about this before, the term infantry, if you like, is to do with infants, children. So I'll maybe see if I can find that in Robert Graves's. If it's not Apollodorus, it must be in Robert Graves's little thing. I'll see if we can find it for you for next time. But yeah, this is the God Emperor's curious theory about all male armies. And I suppose the question is, there's certain things that we can see in it that you can argue are true. Other things I think you can argue that are not true. Some things that I think possibly would be seen as a bit, whoa, that's interesting. The book, I suppose the other thing, folks, very quickly, the book, I think we mentioned it earlier. Where some of Frank's ideas come from in relation to this. Bear with me. Where is it? There we go. Is 1950, The Sexual Cycle of Human Warfare by Norman Walter. Yeah. There we go. And I dare say a few other ideas and observations about men, etc., and some kind of, I think Julian was talking a wee bit there about the other week about sort of relationships with the older men, younger men, kind of thing, things like the Iliad. I better catch up with your comments, folks, actually. But it's a fascinating chapter, and I just, from my own point of view. Oh, by the way, that other thing that we're left with at the end there, that little, what is the god, the god business, but what is Leto's god? And we're told it's probably chance, lady luck, if you like, Fortuna Imperatrix Monday, that which is random. Now let's just see where we got to with comments, folks. Yeah, Julian said, I've never considered the specifics, alchemically considered this specific idea of sublimation. Yeah. Julian said, isn't Leto a colony mechanism? Colony organism, doesn't he see humanity as one organism? I put that way again, and we got a couple of messages retracted. And Julian said, Bruce absolutely deserves regard from Dune fans. Yeah, Herbert's relationship with his son Bruce is this is the interesting thing. As much as we talk about Herbert's ideas, they're not fixed in stone, and they do evolve and they change. And I think Frank's definitely trying to process something here in how he views, again, the military in particular here. Um, and as I said, he's trying to sort of say that this isn't the normal homosexual person we're talking about. He's trying to say this is an aberrant homosexual. You can have an aberrant straight character, therefore, his defense of it is, why can't you have an aberrant gay character? I've always said this. I was planning to do a little video about this, and I put together the work on this. The honest truth is that neither man really brings it up. But why is the Baron the way he is because he's based heavily on Laius. As I said, if anybody wants to check this out, I've got 3 videos on the history of the Pelopid line. You'll find him coming in from the Theban line, interfering in a guest, if you like, of Pelops, the kidnapping of Chrysippus, etc., etc. And the response of it's responded to by is Atreus and Atreus and Thyestes, possibly, if I can remember correctly. So there's a big sort of hot pursuit of Laius and following the kidnapping of Chrysippus, and I believe he's murdered. The boy is murdered by Hippodamia, and she tries to blame Laius for the killing. But I think, if I can remember correctly, Chrysippus's last act is to go, she did it. Yeah, it's a part of the House of the House of the Pelopid line. Is a part of their story, actually. And Laius kidnapping Chrysippus. Laius is also the father of Oedipus. Excuse me. Pardon me. And again, we have that's the second set of myths, if you like, the Pelopid line, but the Theban line is heavily tied into the Atreides as well. Certainly towards the last, but Blind Paul is very much Oedipus, I think, yeah. So there we go. Bruce, absolutely. Yes, indeed. I think there's some things, but obviously between Frank and his son. And I wonder it'd be interesting to think what his son thought of this. But it was just to give you that little reading from that transcript of that speech at UCLA, just to put it into its timeline. That's after this book is published. And really, the only problem really with, I think, that you can logically see with the main gay character in the Dune series is the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, is that he's aberrant, as Frank puts it. The correct term is he's a paedophile. That's the real problem, I think. And otherwise, you could possibly look at the Baron as a positive, villainous gay character, but he certainly isn't. He's a very good character, but he's a monster. And the interesting thing, I suppose, is that Leto Atreides is not much different from him. There's I suppose the appetites of the Baron are what makes him partly monstrous, But it's not just his greed, etc., but the lusting after Paul, and there's a psychopathy with him there and a sadism there, and it's kind of shared by Piter, who has that same sort of inclination towards the Lady Jessica. So there we go. Sadism, masochism, homosexuality in the army, how it all goes wrong, becomes murderous and a bit rapey. We jump out of the conversation about these topics right at the end and move into genes. And we get a little bit of info about the face dancers. We've known that they're mules before, I think. But that's a problem that the God Emperor doesn't want to occur within his human breeding stock. And we get a little bit about his religion, but we jump out of this topic, and we do jump into it, eat around it, jump back in, have a bit of food, jump, And I think most importantly, how we're looking at this. This is the new civilization that Duncan Idaho has awakened to. There's something similar in that sense, if you like. What would we put it? The Forever War. I'm not sure it's the first one, actually. It probably is the first one. The separations that the combatants come back to. One of them is that they return to the Earth when it's pretty much all gay. And I think they have to make a kind of decision just that nobody's going to force them to be gay, but that's the way the world has gone. And do they want to stay or leave, this kind of thing? I always thought it was an interesting way of looking at it as an interesting. So each time the people go to fight, if you like, the changes that have happened to society actually in reality would represent the difference, the distancing of yourself from the society that you fought for. If you like, Joe Haldeman going out and doing his tours in Vietnam, each time he came back, there's more separation. It's an interesting set of books. But yes, indeed, tricky stuff just to get the gist of what Frank's actually saying. I get a little bit of a sense of general semantics as well. If he believes in chance in that sense, by the way, just at the end, is to do with the way human stock, once it has been paired, breeds in the way it's always been bred. Sexual reproduction, chance, luck, I think, the random. Yes, indeed. The other thing, I thought just very much to point out, was that Duncan eating the melon. Melon's from the word for apple or fruit of a tree, isn't it? But there's something suggestive about it as well. Something about Adam and Eve almost, I think. It's been an interesting chapter. There's some interesting little points that have been made. It's, I suppose, Duncan's fascination, his obsession, possibly a little bit of homophobia, his questioning over all of this, and it has led to Moneo. The Leto's got a curious theory about this. Oh, has he? It's an interesting the way the chapter's done. That conversational style over the breakfast is very good. I think it's definitely dealing with some tricky concepts, if you like. Goodness knows how my sponsor, if anybody wants to advertise on tonight's episode with the things that we're talking about, Bill Davis says, I sometimes wonder if there's nothing really special about Idaho, that the God Emperor could have done it to anyone, and Duncan was just chosen to keep the ghost of Paul subdued. Oh, what did I do there? Sorry, folks, I've done something. Oh, goodness. I've done something. I've done. Bear with me. I don't know what I've done, folks. I've accidentally clicked a button on my mouse, and it's hidden you all. Let me see if I can get you back. Going live. I'm back, I hope. Sorry about that, folks. I got booted there a wee bit. I clicked something. I don't know what keeps happening. I just lose that side screen and everything disappears. And you go, where did that go? But apologies if you're still there. Bill was saying, I sometimes wonder if there's nothing really special about Idaho that the God Emperor could have done it to anyone, and Duncan was just chosen to keep the ghost of Paul subdued. That basically Idaho was chosen as a matter of convenience. To keep his father in check. Yeah, there's something about having a tether, I think, in some ways. I don't know how to explain it, but why the Duncan? And it kind of also makes me think, if Leto was so keen for, companions and stuff like that, why not do it with Gurney Halleck as well? Get the gang back together again. Well, there we go. It's a fascinating. Sorry about getting us booted there, folks. It's a fascinating chapter with, I suppose, more questions. These maybe certainly with more questions. But we've got the reasoning to a degree of why the God Emperor has a female-only army as opposed to a male army. And we wonder again, how long has this been going on for? What's the effect of this, if you like? Possibly this role reversal of traditional roles, and I think we're starting to get a big head towards that. I've always thought that the first Dune series very much male orientated, with the even though we begin with the Bene Gesserit and so on, as we go through the God Emperor, we're pivoting towards the focus on the female. I think within the series, and the God Emperor is almost a kind of gender neutral. He's both male and female in a way, isn't he? Well, listen, folks, there we go. It's been fascinating. Fascinating chapter. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. It's much appreciated. We should be back on Thursday at our normal time of 10 p.m. GMT +1 next week. Back to Thursday. We only went with tonight because we just basically didn't have the work done, I'm afraid. Lots of notes scribbling and checking on stuff there. But as I said, particularly important to this chapter is the I suppose it must be if Freud invented it, the Freudian concept of sublimation. Sublimation. But if you have a wee look at Wikipedia, it says it's an interesting enough subject, and it's a thing that came out of alchemy, which I think we might be heading towards some stuff from that as well. But there we go, folks. I'm going to wrap up anyway because I'm pooped. I'm absolutely shattered. It's 12:30 in the morning here in the witching hour. I'm simply saying thanks, Doc and Aldo. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, everybody. As always, this has been great. And Bill said thank you. Great show. Yeah, I can hear myself a lot better this week, but I have to say last week threw me so badly. I was laughing so much just because just like a nervous chuckle because I felt like I was taking the show from underwater, you know. But thank you very much. An interesting topic or two to navigate tonight, you know. I look forward to getting back on with it, and yeah, hopefully getting a few more things up for you real soon, folks. So in the meantime, I'll say as usual, good night. Thank you very much for all your help and contributions, etc., and your comments. Always appreciated. Look after yourselves, folks. Take it easy, and we'll see you real soon. Thank you very much again. All the best and good night. Bye bye.